For those of you who don't know, I was detained by Customs and Border Patrol inside of the O'Hare Airport. I get to the global entry line and they're processing everybody expeditiously. Gets to me, take a photo, boom, walk in. Instantly, the Customs and Border Patrol agent goes, "Step aside, sir. An agent will come and take you to another location." I was like, is that proper protocol? It's like, sometimes it happens. It's very obvious that they knew exactly who I was. It's very obvious that they knew how to like navigate the conversation. The thing that they asked me is literally not allowed. Like, what do you mean? Why is this denying me entry into the country of my birth? You can't just stop me at the border and be like, what's your opinion on Donald Trump? You're not allowed to enter the nation.
How I got detained as a United States citizen, born and raised. And I'm just gonna go over everything, give you guys the entire story and all the details. In Spain for about a month or so, I had a layover in Berlin, Germany for around 2 hours, and then I came into the United States. And then an officer told me I needed to go to the right. So I go to the right, I get asked questions by another officer. He asked me where I'm coming from and what I did for work. That officer then took me to a room, which I did insert a photo of, and I will give you guys again here. Which this is the first room I was taken to. From there, they told me to sit back down, and then they transferred me to another room. That other room, the officer asked me what I did for work, exactly why I was traveling. I said the same thing. I did TikTok. From that point, I normally saw people either leave after the first room or the second room. They were just good to go. For some reason, they had me go. Now, another officer was escorting me down to the escalators past Border Patrol. From there is this like baggage claim area. There was an officer standing in front of this baggage claim. Keep in mind, this is like all blocked off. And then there's another officer on the other side. When I was there, my baggage already had been taken for some odd reason. So he told me to continue walking. Then there's rooms, and that's where they asked me to provide my social media accounts for them to go through my TikTok, my Snapchat, my Instagram, my Facebook. They didn't do anything about it. They kind of just took my phone and searched through everything. I don't really know what they were looking for. I don't have more answers. I complied with every single thing that they asked. I didn't give them a hard time about anything because I'm more scared than anything.
I was actually going to make a video a couple months ago about basically all these tourists getting detained by Homeland Security, and lots of them actually even being imprisoned by Homeland Security because of things either to do with visas or just suspicions Homeland Security, whether that be the border or ICE, had about them. And there's been so many horror stories at this point. And what happened with a lot of those stories, as terrible as they weren't really political. Like, non-Americans traveling to the US weren't being held because they've been vocally supporting like Palestine, or they'd made, criticisms of Donald Trump or something like that. I'm sure there have been cases that I haven't read about where that has happened. But what's happening now, clearly, is they're using Homeland Security to go after the left generally. And of course, I'm a bit late to this, so you would have seen Hasan was actually detained on his arrival back from France, I believe, and he was questioned. I actually have another person who posted on TikTok about being detained as well, who runs an anti-Trump clothing site. I'm going to talk about that a little bit because I'm not sure if that person was politically targeted. But it's fair to say that if you are someone who has some sort of sizable platform, American or otherwise, and you've expressed like any left-wing sentiment, like from liberal to actually like socialist, it's an era where you're going to have to be increasingly like really careful if you even travel outside of the United States and come back. Because I feel like it's a combination of things. Like, sure, we've seen the Trump administration like actually directly say stuff like, we're going to suspend habeas corpus, we're going to suspend basically your rights to things like trials on their immigration crackdown, which also involves like actual US citizens. And it's clear like there is this directive from the top, but it's also clear in this environment, groups like ICE are just emboldened to go after whoever they want. And it's very clear, in my opinion at least, ICE and Homeland Security just attracts the most power-hungry fascists. And although there might be some top-down, like locally in different branches, I do believe now there is a climate where these groups are essentially acting off their own accord to go after certain groups. And I will say Hasan is probably flagged on some database, but with a lot of other instances we've seen, and how just like random people get picked out of a crowd and then thrown in a cell and like treated like absolute garbage, it's pretty clear these groups are just absolutely unaccountable, even if they are like emboldened by the Trump administration. And of course, groups like ICE and Homeland Security haven't always been around. That is like a relic of the war on terror that, Obama and Joe Biden both used, as well as Donald Trump. But I just want to talk about this in this really scary climate right now, especially in regards to America, and just talk about like how you can keep yourself safe, talk about the precautions, and also if you want to take one thing away from this video, please do not go to America if you have any sort of public presence on the internet where you've expressed left-wing sentiment. Like, seriously, don't go. I'm sure loads of you maybe have even gone and you've been fine, but at the same time, this is like a very real threat now. It's not just like Hasan is the only example of someone being detained for their political views and stuff, right? We've seen this hysteria around Palestine is absolutely sweeping the globe. We've seen it recently with the whole outrage towards groups like Kneecap, who performed at Coachella, expressing pro-Palestine sentiment. And Hasan is just the latest victim of this. But he will not be the last. And also, there's going to be plenty of people like Hasan who've expressed these beliefs online that won't have this defense of being like a very well-known public figure who has like millions of followers and this massive audience, because so many of like mainstream press have reported on this story, right? And yeah, he says he knows this as well, and that's why he acted in the way he acted. But as he says himself, and as a lot of people are saying in reaction to him, don't act like he did if you are detained at the border for any reason. You just make sure you don't talk to border agents, make sure you stay quiet, and also ask for a lawyer as well. Now, to shout something out that would probably get me flagged if I tried to go to the US, my girlfriend is running a half marathon this week, and she's raising money for medical aid for Palestinians. Thank you so much to everyone who's already contributed. It's the final week, the final push, so if you haven't, please consider it. Thank you so much to everyone who has donated and everyone who's donated to my fundraiser at the end of last year as well. So now let's get further into the video. So by now, I'm like a couple days late. You guys would have seen this whole story. Hasan had gone to France. He comes back and then he gets stopped at immigration at the airport. Now, I originally thought Hasan was born in Turkey. Then I read today that he is actually born in the US, because I thought that'd be like another part of this, that they might be threatening like his whole citizenship. Although I'm sure they would try that stuff anyway, considering he lived in Turkey. But he made a 40-minute video on his own channel, so if you want to hear everything he has to say, go and watch that. Let's just hear him explain it in his own words.
For those of you who don't know, I was detained by Customs and Border Patrol inside of the O'Hare Airport. I get to the global entry line and they're processing everybody expeditiously. Gets to me, take a photo, boom, walk in. Instantly, the Customs and Border Patrol agent goes, "Step aside, sir. An agent will come and take you to another location." I was like, is that proper protocol? It's like, sometimes it happens. There's a detention area. I'm sitting there. There's like a bunch of terrified families. There's an old lady in a wheelchair. Finally, this agent comes out. They take me to this back room and we got to talking. And let me tell you folks, the TikTokers that talked about being detained, they were right. It was an insane situation. So it's very obvious that they knew exactly who the I was. It's very obvious that they knew how to like navigate the conversation. You know, he's like, "Oh, what are you doing in Chicago?" And I was very revealing. I was like, "I want to take my family out for Mother's Day to France, but I had to come back early from France because I have a speaking engagement at University of Chicago." And he was like, "Oh, what kind of speaking engagement?" It's like, "I don't know, some like journalism school stuff." And he's like, "Oh, well, since you mentioned that, what do you do as a job?" And I was like, "I'm a Twitch streamer." And he's like, "Well, since you mentioned that, what kind of things do you stream about?" So I was just like, "I play video games, but I also do current events sometimes." And he's like, "Since you mentioned that, do you talk about the news?" And I was like, "Yeah, I talk about the news." "So when you talk about the news, do you talk about the war?" And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" He's like, "Do you talk about Trump?" And that was the first time where I was like, what the is this question? Like, I literally straight up told him, I was like, "Why are you asking me this?" Like, what does this have to do with anything? None of these questions are actually valid questions to ask. But I was entertaining it because, one, I didn't want to present it as being difficult because I didn't want to extend the detention. And two, I actually wanted to see how far I could take it. And I'm glad I did this because the reality of the matter is I'm profoundly privileged. I'm a public person. I have enough money to be able to fight back against this sort of thing. And they know who the I am. So obviously the reason for why they're doing that is, I think, to try to create an environment of fear, to try to get people like myself, or at least like others that would be in my shoes that don't have that same level of security, to shut the up. And I'm going to use the privilege that I have in that moment to try and see what the they're doing. Every single thing that they ask me, he's literally not allowed. Like, what the do you mean? Why is this denying me entry into the country of my birth? You can't just stop me at the border and be like, what's your opinion on Donald Trump? You're not allowed to enter the nation.
Obviously, that is really fucked up. Like, can you imagine any scenario where you go back to your home country and the border take you aside and start asking you like political questions and stuff, no matter like what your job is? It sounds illegal. It should be illegal. And I'm going to read some criticism because a lot of people are like really angry with what he did here and saying like he's setting a terrible example. The one thing I would say is it's a bit nuanced. Like, yeah, obviously, like he is setting a bad example if people are just taking like these clips. He is recognizing he's privileged, of course, because he knows something bad happens to him, it's going to cause like such a shitstorm, basically, because he has that power and fame and he realizes he's privileged. I'll just say he's his own person. If he really understands the risks of this and he wants to like test this and then talk about it with his audience afterwards, I mean, that is his like own decision, really. I think it's a bit naive to even try and test this because at the same time, as much like clout on the internet as you have, I do think there is a potential future where the US government or people in the border would happily detain him and lock him up and use the justification that we've seen recently, people calling him like Hamas piker, you support the enemies of America. Now, unlike the UK, in theory, even if Hasan said this type of stuff, like he actually did support and like vocally supported like Hamas and stuff like that, it should be protected by the First Amendment. We know that's probably not the case. For example, if you said something like that in the UK, like you probably would be arrested if you were a high profile public figure, right? He acknowledges they're asking him all these questions like they don't know who he is when they clearly do, because they want to trip him up and potentially maybe use it against him one day. Obviously, someone who doesn't have a legal background or probably has studied a lot of cases like this, he probably doesn't know how much trouble he could get himself in by even what he's responding to in regards to this conversation, right? In terms of if he ever got into some actual like legal proceedings over something to do with this would all be used against him and it would all be used as evidence that the judge would take very, very seriously. That's sadly what happens a lot of the times. Cops are seen as like these expert witnesses. Even I was reading, they will submit their readings of like your body language as like expert testimony and shit, which the judge will take really seriously, even though we know that's such a joke when it comes to organizations like ICE just filled with these like fascist Trump sympathizers. But the silver lining is, I guess for a lot of people, he's helped reveal how there is just this massive war on free speech, especially against the left, and Trump's administration has just emboldened every single fascist piece of shit in Homeland Security to just go out of their way to harass people and intimidate people. We don't know how far this goes up to the top of the command of these groups, and it's probably fair to say that if you have tweeted something left-wing on an account that even might be linked to you, it might not be in some database yet, but that is still the threat when it comes to these things. And like he was saying as well, and we've seen examples of this, there are examples that they'll go through your phones and they'll go through your social media accounts. And if you're just going to do all of that without a lawyer, then you really are going to fuck yourself. But anyway, I want to move on before we talk about just general advice to avoiding this stuff. And here's another example of someone who is obviously way more intimidated because they know all this stuff that's been happening and they really don't have a powerful voice. So there's a TikTok user called Eyes of Sav, which she has 4,900 followers, so not like a massive following. And she talked about going through like a similar process. And again, it just seems like needless. It just seems like it's completely designed to just intimidate someone who is a US citizen. Now, she actually has a shop that has anti-Trump merch. On the site, it says, portion of every purchase goes to organizing, supporting LGBTQ plus rights, immigrants, Ukraine, Palestine, and those struggling with poverty and medical debt in America. And the site is called Trump for the Dump. But let's just listen to her experience as well.
I went through the global entry line, they scanned my eyes, and I continued walking. It had the green check mark, and then an officer told me I needed to go to the right. So I go to the right, I get asked questions by another officer. He asked me where I'm coming from and what I did for work. Then he asked me to step into this box-looking thing. It's about, 3 sides, and then he told me another officer will come and grab me. That officer then took me to a room, which I of all skin colors. I know a lot of people think I was the only minority. And that's where I was asked my father's citizenship status. My father is an American citizen. He has been for the last 25 years before I was born. I did not have the answers to any of those questions because I would not know. From there, they told me to sit back down, and then they transferred me to another room. That other room, the officer asked me what I did for work, exactly why I was traveling. I said the same thing. I did TikTok. From that point, I normally saw people either leave after the first room or the second room. They were just good to go. For some reason, they had me go. Now, another officer was escorting me. down to the escalators past Border Patrol. From there is this like baggage claim area. There was an officer standing in front of this baggage claim. Keep in mind, this is like all blocked off. And then there's another officer on the other side. When I was there, my baggage already had been taken for some odd reason. So he told me to continue walking. Then there's rooms, and that's where they asked me to provide my social media accounts for them to go through my TikTok, my Snapchat, my Instagram, my Facebook. As well as show them how much I was making daily on TikTok and show them the deposits that were being made on TikTok. And again, why I was traveling. It's the same questions all over again. They will go through your luggage. They dumped out all my things on the counter, and they were asking me if I was the only person that had packed my bags. Of course, I said yes. But it was the worst search I've ever seen in my entire life. They dumped everything out. They didn't open anything. I had pill bottles that were, in like colored containers because that's how my medication came. They didn't even open them. So I don't understand what they even searched. And then again, I was asked the same questions about what I do for work, why I was traveling, for how long I was traveling, and then more again about my father. There's around 40 officers that are just like on their phones doing I don't even know what. Keep in mind, I am the only person I see, and there was also nobody else held where I was at. They had asked me when, where, and why if I had any trips planned. Do not plan to leave the US yet. So I answered no, and he proceeded to literally scream in my face 4 times, and I told him no every single time. After about 2.5 hours to 3 hours, and during this entire thing, I was finally let go after telling them no, that I had no plans to leave the United States. I was again handed to around 5 different officers, I'm not sure if I made that clear, and put in around 3 to 4 different rooms. I believe 4. Now, a lot of people ask why I didn't object. I barely know my rights, and I barely know them during like the whole border area or wherever that you want to call it, immigration area. I have no idea what they would be. And imagine, I was already held for 2.5, almost 3 hours, and I didn't object. I was the nicest person ever. I gave them all the information they wanted, and I was still held for that long. And still treated like shit. So me objecting to anything would have just made my situation a whole lot worse.
So obviously that sounds like really similar to Hasan's one. She didn't know her rights at all. And this is just someone with like a pretty like minor TikTok following and an anti-Trump store. Like, I personally don't think she was targeted for politics like Hasan. Maybe more that her like dad wasn't born in the US and they're just like trying their luck. It feels like this whole process is just designed to get someone to say something where you can try and deport them. And that's why she's been held for so long. That's why she was being intimidated. That's why they were asking her so many questions. Or they kept on asking her the same questions because they want her to give them a different answer or slip up so they can say, well, you're lying to us. And now we have reason to believe that you're, doing something illegal or whatever it is. And this, again, is someone who is a US citizen. Like, sure, maybe there is some sort of thing that could maybe flag her on the system that she's anti-Donald Trump or whatever. But I believe more it's probably a combination of racial profiling, but something to do with her dad not being born in the US, and probably just fishing. And then there's another element to it. A lot of these ICE agents are probably just bored as fuck and love throwing their power around, so they just love and get off on intimidating people. And I would say probably a lot of these dudes would probably get off on intimidating just a woman on her own as well. So it's obviously like really bleak fascist shit, but it shows you with that can pretty much happen to anyone. But now it's clear these immigration organizations are clearly going after people who are even US citizens, and we saw that with Mahmoud Khalil, we've seen this with other people, and now we're seeing it with Hasan, someone who was born in America. They are purely trying to catch you out based on your left-wing politics. And the thing is as well, people can like trick themselves into thinking this is just Donald Trump. The next Democratic president will not rein these people in. Like, ICE should have been abolished when Obama became president. ICE should have been abolished when Biden became president. ICE should not exist. Homeland Security should not be operating in this way. And the Democrats are going to let it continue to run amok. And it's like with the police forces, right? Remember how much Biden was promising them like more funding, and the way they responded to Democrats wanting them to like fund the police less. Most police, like the overwhelming majority of police, are Republicans and far right. And I would imagine that number is far higher in people who work on the border. But they're going to continue massive funding to these agencies because fundamentally, although Democrats might not like that ICE agents going out of their way to harass people who haven't done anything wrong, who have been born in the US, have their papers all in order, and maybe just purely for political reasons, fundamentally, they still want them to act how they act because they serve a purpose. And part of that purpose is intimidation and is this threat of don't come here illegally or these guys are going to get you and put you into horrible conditions. Remember all those camps on the border we saw under the first Trump administration? Biden deported just as many people as Donald Trump and he never shut these things down, right? I totally admit this is a symptom of Donald Trump's America where these people feel far more emboldened. Like, that is obviously true. People need to stop pretending that Joe Biden didn't also let Homeland Security and ICE do these types of things as well, because it's been going on for years and years. Like the fascist J. Edgar Hoover wannabe you're seeing all over Fox News, he was appointed by Obama. So let's stop deluding ourselves thinking the Democrats are that much better on this. They're just not as extreme and they just don't embolden these people as much. But fundamentally and ideologically, they do feel a similar way. But something important, obviously, the TikTok user said was she didn't know her rights. And Hasan actually didn't invoke his rights. He didn't plead the Fifth Amendment, didn't ask for a lawyer. And that's why a lot of people were mad, because they're like, this was the perfect opportunity to show people what you should have actually done. And you can debate that in the comments if you think he did the right thing. But I just want to read what people were saying he should have done to set the example, and what people should do if they're faced in a similar situation to these two people. So Chad Loader posted this thread on Blue Sky where they spoke about Hasan. So police can question you, and it just relates to general law enforcement, not just immigration. Police can question you, and even if you say nothing, they're allowed to testify about your demeanor and body language during questioning. Most judges will allow this as a form of expert testimony. That's why shut the fuck up is not enough. You need to explicitly say, I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. The reason you need to clearly and loudly invoke your Fifth Amendment rights for the body cam footage is so your lawyer can help you and your comrades later. Cops might not give a fuck about your rights in that moment, but please don't make your lawyer's job harder for no reason. Use the script. Dealing with cops questioning you is one of those areas where it's really important to listen to people with lived experience in these situations. There's a lot of folk knowledge and a lot of bad advice. There is a script for a reason. Don't make it easier for the cops to jam you up. There's very little you can say or do while in custody to help your situation in that moment, but you can definitely make your situation worse, and you can get your friends jammed up without realizing it. The longer the questioning goes on, the more the cops have to use. After you invoke, assuming you keep that shut the fuck up energy going, nothing is admissible. They have to stop questioning you. And a lawyer called Thomas Neville said in response, add I want a lawyer to your script. You can change your mind about whether to invoke your right to remain silent, and that change of heart can be manifested by deciding to talk to the cops. If they wear you down, you may waive that right. Once you've asked for a lawyer, questioning must stop until you've talked to a lawyer. That takes away their ability to wear you down that front. Do both, but absolutely and unambiguously ask to talk to a lawyer. Obviously, all of that is easier said than done. Of course, in the second example, when you're just one random person who's pulled into an intimidating situation, basically on your own, and these people are just trying to intimidate you, it's obviously really hard to just be like, I invoke the Fifth Amendment, and can I have a lawyer? Can I have a lawyer? Because of course, even with groups like ICE, they don't give a fuck, really, do they? They still are going to try and intimidate you no matter what you say. But it's important to know this anyway, because if what we've seen with other examples, where you actually get detained and then obviously even imprisoned by immigration forces or police, like they're saying, you can't really do anything for yourself in those moments. If they have this goal in mind of throwing you in jail, but for your legal case and for the lawyers later, it's much better that you stay quiet and don't talk to them, because as many people have said on that thread as well, it will be used against you and it will never be used in your favor. So of course, in the Hasan example, it's whatever. He can make that decision himself if he wants to expose the system. Obviously, I totally accept the criticism that he could have used this as a perfect example of what to do, rather than I'm going to go in trying to see where this line of questioning leads, because at the end of the day, it can get him in loads of shit later, and this could easily be used against him. And on one note, to keep yourself safe generally, I might seem like a massive hypocrite saying this as someone who has a massive public presence. I have no plans to go to America anytime soon. I would have loved to go, and my girlfriend actually went just as Trump was elected, but not when he was president, to New York, and I really wanted to go, but I'm just not going to do that now, because I know there is a high risk that either I could be flagged for something to do with my politics. So I'm never going to America. But if you're going to a country like this, like America, just make sure, if you have your phone on you, log out of everything, delete the apps, and make sure your Face ID, you can unlock your phone with your face, make sure that's turned off. If you're planning on traveling and you're going to tweet some spicy shit about Americans in America, just make sure you do it on a more anonymous profile, I would say, to keep yourself safe. And it blows my mind that the Trump administration don't give a shit about what this is going to do to tourism leading up to the World Cup next year, but I guess that's what they want. They just want people to live in total fear, to be less critical of the Trump regime, and that includes just individuals on social media. But yeah, if you're an American citizen who is planning on traveling abroad, there's probably loads of you watching this video, just obviously make sure you know your rights when returning, and just be careful with your social media and your phones, and just make sure you don't have lots of stuff saved. And also, I will say as well, your pictures, because Hasan made me think of this, he had all these memes on his phone, like Donald Trump looking a certain way, for example. Maybe like delete them off your phone as well, and just be like super careful, and just think about all the ways they might try and find something. It's obviously like crazy. There's even examples of them doing this, but just in your mind, think of these people being out for blood. Like, they want to arrest people. They would love to do this. Ideologically, they'd love to do this. And psychologically, they'd get off on doing this. So just don't give them any excuse, and just make sure you're careful. And my best advice to anyone who's not American, especially with a high-profile social media account where you might talk about politics sometimes, don't go to America. Just completely avoid it at this point. Like, even if you want to go to the World Cup next year, go to the games in Mexico and Canada. Don't go to the games in the US. So yeah, late with this one, but that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.